So many people have their own word for it, their own name. A name that usually corresponds with its peculiar nature or devastating power. The Vulpinians call it the Fogged Lands. The Illusions call it the Shroud. The Crandili call it the Voided Space, and the Saranasi call it the Shroud. Humanity calls it the Mist. All different names, all in reference to the same place. It is a void of eternity between worlds and apart from universes, a dimension within dimensions. For the sake of this document, I will refer to it as the Shroud. It is essentially where all latent psionic energy comes from. It is the origin point for all one's lost thoughts, forgotten dreams, terrifying nightmares, and shattered minds go to or come from. You see, we have determined many things about our universe. We all knew for millennia two different realms of possibility. Basic school teachings. Ethereum, the realm of magic. Incalidae, the realm of souls. It was only after we encountered humanity we learned of two more. Tartarus, the so-called realm of the machines, and finally, the Shroud. Well, technically we did know of them, we simply had other things to consider, so gave them a name and never bothered to look into it. It was only after humanity showed us what was going on that we finally learned of them, and suddenly had names for some of the strangest and most disastrous events in our histories. To the staggered shock of the entire galaxy, humanity had figured out how to gain access to these two universes, even gaining power from them. For the sake of reference, I am going to list some statistics here. Yes, I know, boring math, but hear me out. 1 in every 10 sapiens is capable of magic, sorcery, or interfering with the Ethereum. 1 in every 25 is capable of interfacing or accessing Incalidae, the soul realm. 1 in 1,000 is capable of accessing Tartarus, the machine realm. Only 1 in every 150,000 sapiens are capable of interfacing with the Shroud. Now imagine, if you will, a psionic. Now imagine a psionic from a Class 4 death world. Scared yet? Have you ever witnessed a psionic awakening? I have. I was there. The victim was one of my students. And I do mean victim. I won't sugarcoat this, as the human phrase goes. The Shroud is a literal hellscape of memories, nightmares, dreams, and shadows that hold the very secrets of the universe itself. Humans who have psionic capabilities tell me that even an eldritch god called Cthulhu refuses to go there or even try go near it. So imagine when, by some chance or sick joke, some random dude suddenly awakens to this maelstrom of insanity. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. Psionics can rip dreadnoughts apart with a snap of a finger, rebuild shattered planets with a bit of concentration and patience, heal any wound and regrow limbs just by thinking about it. Psionics are as close as we will ever get to God without first being dead. An awakening. It's a thing of horror, the likes of which would make even the gods in the Ethereum shriek in terror. The closest description I can muster from all of my research is as follows. Imagine you are carrying on about your day when suddenly your brain switches off as the Shroud suddenly enters your mind. In the flash of an instant, you are overcome by the nightmares of billions of entities, the shrieking howls of ghosts and demons, and the sheer, unadulterated emotion felt by trillions of people long dead or forgotten. Now imagine a strange power keeping your brain in a form of suspension as it puts your body on autopilot, carrying on with your day while it manipulates your mind. When it's done, it plants a seed inside your soul, forcing a mutation in your body that causes all sorts of freaky stuff to happen. Ghost organs that replace damaged body parts, mutations that cause unimaginably fast cellular regeneration. Your flesh begins to harden to such an extent, you become a living battleship hull. A psionic awakening is one of the most terrifying things that can happen to you. Humans are the only ones who can survive it with any real statistical consistency. Other species, it's a 1 in 50 million dice roll. The Vulpinians suffer catastrophic brain damage. The Illusions lose all motor control and go on a blind, uncontrolled rampage. The Crandili suffer agony the likes of which no kind of torture could ever come close to and often kill themselves to stop the pain. My species, the Saranasi, well, if our brains don't go catatonic or comatose for years on end, for lack of a better description, we break. Humanity, well, let me tell you about one such awakening. His name was Jack Lawson. Most called him Jackie or simply Jay. He was the quiet kid in his high school senior year. I was attending his school as a teacher, showing humans our education techniques and teaching galactic history. It was lunchtime in the cafeteria, and I was chatting to some students who were very curious. We Serenacii are 2 feet taller than humans, blue rubbery skin and large bulbous eyes. These kids were all very interested in what I was, and I was more than happy to indulge them. In the middle of one such discussion, I noticed him for the first time. Slumped over his desk, head in his arms, breathing slowly but very deeply. I could sense a strange aura coming from him, but couldn't place its origin or strength. I excused myself and approached him. I got no response as I stood next to him, wondering if he was okay. I gently patted him on the shoulder and he sluggishly sat up. His eyes were glazed over. Pupils and iris turned a sickening scarlet red, his eyeballs bloodshot with his breathing slowing to a crawl. By this point, I had been around humans long enough to understand something was critically wrong with this boy. I looked around for any other faculty and tried to remember my first aid training. He looked at me and, without warning, grabbed one of the metal butter knives sitting on the table. With no emotion, no warning, no nothing, he held it in his right hand and slammed it into the palm of his left hand, stabbing himself clean through flesh and bone. He forced the blade and handle of the knife straight through his hand, letting it clang on the table, dripping with blood. Everyone in the room had noticed what was going on and now sat horrified at what he just did. Shock overcame us, and I began to panic. He looked at me. "Is this what happens when your soul dies?" he said, his voice a broken whisper. He stood up and dragged his bleeding hand over the table. "Why doesn't it hurt anymore? It's supposed to hurt, right?" He started to walk away, but I was too struck with horror to try anything. I had never thought something like this would ever happen. What the hell was I supposed to do? How does one respond to a student suddenly going insane? He moved out the doorway, and a trail of blood followed him as he swayed his hand. I finally noticed the horrific stench of human blood and snapped back into action, grabbing the first aid kit off the wall. I followed him in as much haste as I could, but if I said I wasn't scared, I would be a liar. Everyone has heard of humanity's strength in combat and sheer horrific ruthlessness when they are pushed far enough. I approached with caution, trying not to void my stomach from the smell of blood. He was barely capable of walking, his footsteps clumsy and staggered, trudging down the corridor in a zombie-like state. He suddenly stopped, making me duck for cover in a panic behind a locker bank. He began to laugh. A soft chuckle at first, then quickly going into a full-blown guffaw as if he had just heard the funniest joke ever. His laughter drew attention now as he began to walk again, barely keeping his footing and nearly tripping in his own blood. His laughter began to change as students and faculty came out to investigate. A voice of a human male got deeper, stronger, darker. One could clearly hear more than just his voice in his now echoing laughter. His laughter's volume increased, now echoing through the entire school. By this point, the psychotic laughter sounded less like one guy and more like an audience of hundreds in an insane asylum. He let out a shrill shriek. A shriek of rage, of hatred, of terror, of pure, unadulterated anger. The lights flickered, wallpaper peeled off, doors rattled, and windows began to crack. That shrill shriek echoed throughout the entire school. Then, in front of my eyes, he vanished. Just like that, 1 second he was there. The next, he was simply gone. Every window in a 5-mile radius suddenly shattered, every light bulb suddenly burnt out, every locker bank, every door, every cabinet or drawer swung open, and the contents exploded onto the floor. The paper on all the walls peeled or cracked, and some tiles on the floor had popped out of their fastenings and shattered. Then, suddenly, it just stopped. The principal had rushed out of his office with a long rifle in his hands to find me on the floor in sheer terror at what I had just seen. Other students who witnessed it were under tables crying, or in a state of heightened agitation, scanning their environment for a threat that didn't exist. Others were holding their hands on their ears, trying to drown out the noise while more simply had passed out. An emergency was called in. The school was evacuated. We were all questioned by police who scoured the school as if there had just been a bombing or something. A statewide manhunt was hastily organized. 100,000 people, military, civilian, police, hell, even visiting aliens volunteered. They searched for a solid week, scouring the entire state with a fine tooth comb. Every house, every building, every basement, office block, public restroom, every place you could think to try find a missing 17-year-old human. Nothing. He had vanished from the surface of the earth completely, leaving nothing save a trail of blood in the hallway and one heck of a mess. 2 weeks passed, and still nothing. Not a trace, nor a sign. His parents began organizing a funeral for him. I will truthfully say I shall never forget the sound of his mother's cries as she received the news. But life goes on, and we had an education to deal with. My students very much unnerved, I came into class about a month after Jack had vanished. I had done roll call and told my students to turn their textbooks to page 9. Jack's seat was in the back corner near the window. He was a loner, so he preferred to be somewhere nobody would bother him. A clever boy, but imperceptively quiet. I turned to start writing today's assignment on the board when the sound of a girl's terrified scream suddenly rang through my class. I looked up at the source of the scream and saw a girl cowering in shock at a student next to the window. The first thing that I saw were those eyes, terrifyingly beautiful, haunting eyes, scarlet red pupils and irises. I moved from my desk and charged towards him, grabbing his head and looking straight into his eyes. As if tattooed into them in gold, his eyeballs bore a set of extremely intricate patterns, as if someone took a gold pen and etched a design into his eyeballs. "Mr. Lawson? Jack? Jackie boy, is that you?" I said, half asking him, and half asking whatever entity afflicted him. Yeah, I'm Jack Lawson. Why are you holding my head?" He replied in kind, as if he had no idea what was going on. I let him go and immediately called the police and his parents. Barely minutes later, his mother burst into the classroom and embraced her son with tears of joy in her eyes. He was, of course, immediately removed from the school, sent to an outer rim planet within human territory along with his family to better his situation and learn to control his abilities. He has no memory of the incident to this day. This is but one of many incidents involving a psionic awakening. There have been others, much worse. Several involving younger children. Many involving older adults, even veterans of wars. Some incidents have resulted in mass casualties. Others have resulted in entire planets being scoured of life. Psionics represent the single most powerful entity ever encountered by sapient life. We have definitive evidence that several eldritch entities, even a few of the so-called old ones, are terrified of them. Humanity may be our allies, but we have counted nearly 3,000 psionics among their numbers. Consider this the next time you think about doing anything to harm a human's friend, or worse, a human, especially the children. Humanity may very likely succeed in turning your home world inside out.